This video will demonstrate how to configure a HiFi 2 4x4 or 8x8 using the HiFi 2 setup utility, available as a free download from the Leviton Security and Automation website. For the purpose of this demonstration, we will run through the configuration for a HiFi 2 8x8. To start, open the software. Initially, you will see that the software opens and automatically creates a new file. Make note of the following. First, there is a conventional Windows menu bar, including File, Connection, and Tools. Second, there are 5 configurable tabs: Info/Connection, Sources, Zones, Groups, and Translations. Before beginning the configuration process, it is always a good practice to make sure you have the latest release of the software. This can be done provided you have an active internet connection by clicking on Tools and selecting Check for Updates. This will open a Check for Updates wizard, which you can use to download any available updates. Starting with the Info/Connection tab, the following should be noted. 1. There is a configurable name field, followed by model, version, and MAC address. There is no information listed other than the default name, as there is no active connection to the HiFi 2 unit. 2. Under Network Settings, DHCP is bulleted by default. 3. The fields for IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway are populated with information, but grayed out. Let's go ahead and make an initial connection to the HiFi 2 system. Click on Connection and select Network Connect. This opens up the Network Connection wizard. If you already know the IP address and port of the HiFi 2, you can enter it into the appropriate fields and click on OK. Otherwise, click on the Discover button. The Discover window will open and list any HiFi 2 systems on the network. Highlight the desired HiFi 2 system and click on Connect. Notice that upon initial connection, the utility communicates with the HiFi 2 and populates the version, MAC address, and even lists the IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway of the network. It is recommended that the first thing you should do is to bullet DHCP disabled, which sets the IP address of the HiFi 2 system as static. You may have to change the IP address depending on the LAN router, but we are going to leave ours alone. Setting the IP address as static ensures we can access the HiFi 2 system reliably from other hardware and/or software, like a Leviton automation system, SnapLink Mobile, or the HiFi 2 application. Next, click on the Source tab. You will see there are 3 configurable columns. First, source name. This is the name of the source component connected to a RIM and can be any user-friendly name. Examples might be tuner or iPod dock or DVD or anything of that nature. Second, gain. The gain for a source component can be adjusted from 0, which is the default, up to 10. And the third column is labeled Enabled. Notice that by default all sources are enabled. By unchecking the boxes for unused sources, they will no longer appear when scrolling through sources on a VSC or viewing sources from a web application like HiFi 2. Next, click on the Zones tab. This is where you configure all of your speakers connected to the HiFi 2. Notice that by default there are 16 zones listed. This is the maximum number of speaker zones available through a HiFi 2 8x8 system, with a HiFi 2 expansion kit also installed. The first column is the zone name. This can be any desired name and typically indicates the location of the speakers. Examples would be living room, dining room, theater room, kitchen, bedroom, and so on. The next column is enabled, and you will notice that all zones are checked by default. Similar to sources, You can uncheck unused zones so that they will not show on a VSC or web application. The next two columns are for treble and bass, respectively. They are set to 0 or mid-range by default and can be configured from -10 up to +10, where minuses decrease and positive values increase the amount of treble or bass. The next column is zone balance, and like the treble and bass, can be adjusted from a -10 to a +10, where the minus values are for increasing the left speaker and the plus values are for increasing the right speaker. The loudness column allows you to enable, disable the loudness or intensity of each zone. By default, loudness is enabled on all zones. The next column is initial volume. This is the volume set when a given zone is initially turned on. By default, all zones are set to 20 and are configurable from 1 to 100. The next column is the page volume. This is for use when the HiFi 2 system is used in conjunction with a home automation controller's paging feature. By default, the page volume is set to 40 for all zones and is configurable from 1 to 100. The last column is the zone group. This allows 2 or more zones in a group to function as one group, which can be useful in larger areas where multiple groups of speakers are used. The HiFi 2 8x8 can support up to 8 different zone groups. Now click on the Groups tab. This is where you define how a zone group is going to function. As you can see, there are a maximum of 8 groups available. The first column is the group name. This can be anything the user desires. The second column is the group behavior, and this dictates how the zones within the group will respond. With same source, all zones within the group will play the same source, although each zone's power, volume, and equalizer are individually adjusted at the zone's VSC. Same source, power, volume. All zones within this group type will respond to all source power. Same source, power, and volume. All zones within this group type will respond to all source, power, and volume commands issued from a member VSC, although each zone's equalizer settings are configured at the individual VSC. Same source, power, volume, equalizer. All zones within this group type will respond in kind to a source, power, volume, or equalizer command. Now click on Translations. This is where you can configure the HiFi 2 system to display information in a specific language. By default, the language is English. The first column, Language Strings, lists the English word. The second column, labeled Transitions, displays the appropriate word for the language selected. To change the language, simply click on the Load Default Words for Language drop-down menu, select the desired language, and then click on the Load button. The translation column will now reflect the suggested word in the given language. Note that you can also modify the displayed word. Once you have made all of the desired changes to your HiFi 2 configuration, you can return to the Info/Connection tab. This is advisable to ensure the network settings are correct. At this point, it is time to write the configuration file to the HiFi 2. Simply click on Connect and select Write Configuration to HiFi 2. A dialog box will open showing the information as it is being written to the HiFi 2. When the write to the HiFi 2 is complete, you may notice that the connection status in the lower left-hand corner changes to disconnected or retrying. This is due to the HiFi 2 rebooting to incorporate the new IP address, if changed from the initial connection to the HiFi 2. If you did not change the IP address, it should reconnect automatically. If you did change the IP address, you may have to go to the connection menu and perform a disconnect and then reconnect again. When finished, it is suggested that you save the file by clicking on File and selecting Save As. This opens up the Save dialog, where you can first name the file as desired and then clicking on Save. At this point, you can now disconnect from the HiFi 2 and close the application.